In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent an angel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said,
"Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you."
Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her,
"Do not be afraid. Mary, you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end."
"How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" The angel answered,
"The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who is said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail."
"I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." Then the angel left her.
At this time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. And in a loud voice she exclaimed,
"Blessed are you who among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her."
And Mary said,
"My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors."
And Mary stayed with Elizabeth for about 3 months, then returned home.
You possibly have in common with Mary. I mean, you heard her story. You heard what was said. You heard about the angel coming to her and telling her she was going to give birth to the Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, right? You heard all those things. So what could you and I possibly have in common with someone like that? Were any of you, as we read that story, thinking, you know what? That sounds a lot like my life. It's not. She carried the Son of God in her womb. Can we do anything but just stand outside and marvel at this? Wonder about it? There's one word that comes up over and over again in this, what we just read, to describe Mary. It's used by multiple people, and it's the word blessed. Mary was blessed. Her cousin Elizabeth declares her the most blessed woman to ever walk the planet. Mary herself predicts that from that generation on, everyone's going to call her blessed. And here we are a couple thousand years later talking about how blessed Mary was. Blessed is a special word. It's a word that means happy, but not in the way you and I use happy today. Jesus used this word in his famous Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. He used it to talk about people who are happy because they are in just the right place. They are in the best position. They are in a right and good and whole relationship with God. And so they're blessed. They're happy. That's what this word means. That's what's behind this word that's used for Mary, being blessed. We use the word a lot today, but we misuse it. If you go order coffee at Starbucks and they give you a large instead of a small, I don't know what the sizes are. I don't drink coffee. But you get a large instead of a small, you might think, oh, I'm so blessed. That's not what it means to be blessed. You may drive a Mercedes and think, oh, I'm so blessed, I've got a Mercedes. That's not what it means to be blessed. You may be the prettiest, prettier than average people compared around you. You look around and see maybe you're prettier than the people around you. That's not what it means to be blessed. You are blessed when you're in a right relationship with God. When you're in the right place with God. That is when you're blessed. You are whole, you are right, you are good, your life is in order, and that's where you are of joy and peace and happiness. That cannot be taken away. And Mary, well, there's probably no one who's ever been more blessed than Mary. No one has ever had a closer connection to God than Mary, right? Been more in the right place where God wanted her to be than Mary. She lived in the wonder of what God was doing, and the wonder of God lived inside of her. Mary truly was blessed. And because of how blessed Mary was, people have tended to react to her the way her cousin Elizabeth did in the story we just read, which, by the way, you can follow along in our app and take notes there too, in the scripture. Otherwise, just go to Luke chapter 1. But we tend to react to Mary many times the way Elizabeth did. You remember when she went to Elizabeth's home, what was Elizabeth's response? It was, whoa, 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 what are you doing here? Why would you come see me? I'm not worthy to have you come see me. People for generations have looked at Mary that way, venerating her and treating her as though she was almost divine, and thinking that, well, you know, there's nothing that I have in common with a woman who is so blessed. She's not in any way like me. And that's a huge mistake that people make, because it keeps us from seeing the journey that Mary took from where she starts in the beginning of what we read to where she ends at the end of what we read. Mary took a journey to get to this place of being blessed, of living truly in the wonder of God. It would be like looking at a skilled musician and thinking, oh my goodness, this guy's an amazing guitarist. And his name is Paul Davids, if you want to look him up. You could look at him and say, wow, you are so blessed to be able to play music that way. I could never, ever do that. And we like to use that as an excuse to kind of say, well, you know, they were just blessed with that ability. And we neglect to see, no, there was a journey they took as well. A journey to go from where they started, which is where most of us start. You pick up an instrument and you play the wrong notes at all the wrong times. Like, do you remember in school when they handed you all the recorder? And what that sounded like? Right? So we all start in that same place that's horrible. And then there's something that happens to people who go from the place of standing outside of music and wondering at it, oh, how do you play so beautifully, to the people who are able to live inside of it and participate in the beauty of creating the music. There's a journey that has to be taken to go from that kind of wondering to that kind of wondering. And so, sadly, we many times look at Mary and we dismiss her as unrelatable, as just so unique and so different. She got the angel. She got chosen. She's going to carry the Son of God. That's not my life. No one picks me for things like that. No one picks me for anything. I'm not living in the awe of God. My life is mundane. My life is normal. My life actually is difficult. My life is a struggle. My life isn't so wonderful. It's painful. It's not anything like Mary's life. And we miss the journey that Mary takes over the course of just these 30 verses. And I get why. It took us less than a minute to read it, right? This journey she took, we read it in less than a minute. And so it would be easy to miss out on what happened in her life and how it connects to you and me. Luke compresses it. He condenses it with the expectation that we'll read it and then chew on it and think about it. It's like orange juice from concentrate. Do you remember orange juice from concentrate? Some of you remember. They still have it, I think. You get the can, like a 24-ounce can, the small can of frozen orange gook, and you take it and mix a bunch of water with it. And, you know, if you're really good at it, you can maybe get a whole gallon of orange juice from like 24 ounces. And what we have here is a gallon-sized story condensed down into a tiny can. And so we have to work to try and understand it and appreciate all that's happening. For kids, for anybody who doesn't remember orange juice from concentrate, just picture popcorn. You put it in the thing, it's just a tiny little kernel, right? You apply a little focused attention in the form of heat, and it expands to 5, 6, 7 times the size it started. Pay attention and look close. What we read in less than a minute is a journey that Mary went on from one type of wonder to another. And I want us to go back and look at where Mary started, because I think it's the place where we all start when God speaks to us. And we first come face to face with the call to follow Jesus and allow his life to lead ours. Mary's journey begins in a place of confused wondering. Here's what we know about Mary. Mary was born into a village called Nazareth that was a nowhere place. Up until a few decades ago, people thought it was maybe even a made-up town that didn't really exist back then. So it was I've been there. It's craggy rocks and wispy grass, and you feel like if I were to try to run around, if I fell, I'm going to get cut to pieces. It's a nowhere place. Nothing distinguishes it from anything else. There's nothing important about Nazareth in history except for that Jesus is from there. When one of Jesus' eventual followers first heard about Jesus and someone said, yeah, he's from Nazareth, this guy said, Nazareth? Nothing good comes from Nazareth. It's a nowhere place. And there's nothing remarkable about her. She's unremarkable. She's a normal young teenage girl who is probably poor. There's no Prince Charming chasing her around with a glass slipper trying to find her. There's no talent scout who's going to discover her and she'll get elevated to fame and move to the big city. There's no way she's not going to become TikTok famous. None of that's going to happen in her life. She is a normal young teenage girl who has got a normal life in a poor village, who doesn't have much, and her life is already mapped out for her. She's been engaged to a man named Joseph, who's a carpenter, who will provide a steady, secure, normal life for her to live. And they'll have children, and he'll work, and then maybe she'll have grandchildren, and she'll take care of her kids, and hopefully take care of her grandkids. And it's all mapped out. This is where she's going. And so Mary, when she describes herself as humble in response to the word from God coming to her, she's not kidding. She's humble. She doesn't have anything. She isn't anybody. There's nothing impressive or remarkable. And then this angel, Gabriel, appears and tells her, you're blessed, and God is with you. She reacts the same way you and I do when we first encounter Jesus. Look at what she says in verse 29. It says, Mary was disturbed at his words, and she wondered. She wondered, how could this be? It disturbed her. It troubled her. She didn't get it. She was confused by it. The same way all of us are. This is the starting point for all of us. Some of you, maybe you remember the starting point. Others of you maybe don't. But that first time where you truly encountered God, I don't know how old you were, but where you truly encountered God. Maybe you grew up in church and then there was that moment when you really experienced Jesus talking to you and you knew he was making a claim on your life, right? That first moment becomes a moment of confusion. Is this true? Is he real? How is it possible? How is it possible that he became fully God and fully man and died for me and cleans my sin and makes me new and can restore my life? How is it possible that he can take all that and then invite me into this relationship with God where I can live in a blessed place and live in the wonder of all that God is doing? How is it possible? This is where we all start. This place of confused wondering about, is any of it real? Is any of it true? And then what we have to do is work our way across from that confused wondering over to this other place of living in wonder. That's the awesome, amazing wonder of seeing what God is doing. So you can stand over here and look at it and be confused by it. That's one type of wonder. The other type of wonder is the one where you're in it. And you're not wondering at it from afar, but you're wondering about it from within. You're amazed by it. This is the wonder of amazement, living in what God is doing. And that's a journey from that kind of wonder to that kind of wonder. It's a journey that you and I need to take as well, just as Mary did. It's a journey. And that's why her story is here. It's not so you and I can read it and wonder about it from a distance because, oh yeah, that's Mary. None of us are like her. No, it's so you and I can read it and then connect it to our lives and find those points of contact and see how you and I can emulate her. Not just admire her, but emulate her. Look at her story again, and let's find this path from confused wonder into awesome wonder. There are two key moments in the story. I think. Two key verses, two key lines that stand out, that shine a light on what it takes to go from this kind of wonder to that kind of wonder. From standing outside what God is doing to living within what God is doing and participating in it. See, up until the moment when Mary is confronted by this call of God, when the angel comes to speak to her. Like we said, her map is laid out for her for what she's going to do and what she's going to be. She knows where she's going. It's secure. It's right. It's good. It's safe. And she can see it. And it makes sense because it lines up with everybody else's maps. But now if she accepts this call from God to follow him and to be part of what he's doing, she's going to have to step off that map. She's going to have to leave that map behind and forget about that map. She's going to probably lose Joseph. As far as she knows, standing here in this moment, when the angel says this to her, if she turns up pregnant and he knows it's not his child, why in the world would he stay with her? How in the world could she possibly expect that he would understand that, oh no, this is a miracle God did? How is she going to tell that story in a way that he'll believe it? So to accept what the angel's saying to her is almost definitely, from where she's standing in this moment, because she doesn't see the rest of the story yet, it means that's over. And it means her family will be incredibly disappointed and look down on her. She'll live in shame in her town. No one will ever look at her the same. They will think she's different than they thought of her before. Her life now will become a confused mess with no security and no certainty. So there she is. I have a map to a secure life, and then I have a path to the unknown. What do you choose? We all come to a moment like this. When you truly come face to face with Jesus and what he calls us to do in following him, we come to this moment and we have to decide, how am I going to respond? Mary responds and says, I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. I am the Lord's servant. May everything you've said about me come true. This is not a movie scene where an adventure is what's expected and jumping off the map is cool because it's a movie. This is real life. She's putting her life security aside and saying, I'm your servant. Let everything you say come true. Have you ever looked at old maps? Like old maps. Not the kind you'd get from AAA in the binder when you would take a road trip, because that's what we used to do. Way before Google had mapped out the whole planet where you could jump on Google Earth and zoom into any place and see it, right? Some of you are from countries on the other side of the world, and you can, hey, go visit anytime on Google Earth. I know it's not the same, but you can go zoom in and see home. But long before all that, there would just be map makers who would make their maps based on how far people had explored. And when they'd come to the end of the place where people had gone to explore, and they didn't know what was beyond, they would write 3 words at the edge. And that right to the edge between what had been explored and was known and was mapped to what was unknown. They would write these 3 words. Hic sunt dracones. Here be dragons. And they would draw ornate pictures of dragons around the edges of maps. Maybe you've seen that and wondered why. Because the idea was, here be dragons. We don't know what happens once you go past this point. You're stepping off the map. It's into the unknown, into uncharted territory. And that sounds cute when it's a Disney musical, but it's not cute when it's your life. To step off the map into a place where you don't know where you're going. I've been in places and times where I had no idea where I was on a different part of the planet, and I'm trusting the person I'm with that they know where we are and where we're going. And you know what? That takes a lot of trust, that they know where they're going. They can see what maybe I can't see because I don't have a map for that area, for that part of the world. Mary stepped off the map, but it wasn't because she was just so courageous and brave and had the courage within her. It's because she chose to trust God. And she believed that even if and even though stepping off the map meant she would not have any idea what was going to happen next and have no control over what was going to happen next in her life, she trusted that God didn't need the map. God was writing a new map. And she chose to trust God instead of trusting herself in what she could arrange or her parents could arrange for herself. She chose to live in the wonder of being part of the map God was writing instead of just living according to the map everyone else had made for her. Instead of living in this side, just wondering at and confused by what God might be doing, she chose to step into it, to step off her map. Mary chose to trust God. And that leads to the second thing, right? We're looking, what's the key to journey from this side of confused trust, of confused wondering, to the awesome wondering of living in what God is doing? It's that trusting God. And that's what Elizabeth confirms. The second key sentence in all this, Elizabeth speaks it. And she sees how Mary has chosen to step off her map and obey God and just say, God, I'll do what you tell me to do. And Elizabeth has kind of done this too. Remember, she's an old woman who's suddenly pregnant and about to have a baby, and because she stepped off her map and onto what God wanted her to do. And she says these words about anyone who steps off their map and follows God. She says, blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. The key to this journey, to being blessed, to living in this place of blessing where we're living in the wonderful awesomeness of God as opposed to confused wondering about God, is trusting and believing that he will do what he has said, that he is who he says he is. That's the key to making this journey from the one type of wonder to the other, to participating in that blessedness and living there. You know, the Bible's full of examples of this. I just want to share one example that give us another touch point besides Mary to help us connect this to our lives, because that's the point. That's why this is in God's word, so that you and I can read it and connect it and live it out ourselves. Do you remember the moment when Jesus sent his disciples out onto the Sea of Galilee, which is truly a giant lake, but it's so big they call it a sea, and it gets violent and rough with storms. And Jesus wanted to go and pray, so he went to pray, and he told the disciples, go ahead across the lake on your own. And they jump in their boat. They're fishermen. They know how to sail. They sailed this lake all their lives, and they head out, but a storm picks up, and they end up trapped and caught in the middle of the lake. They can't go anywhere. And they're not dumb. They know what they're doing, but they can't go anywhere. They're just bobbing around there on the water aimlessly, tossed back and forth by the waves. And Jesus, remember this, walks out to them on the water. And when they see him, they're terrified. They're afraid, the same way Mary was when she saw the angel. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. It's me. And there they are, bobbing in their boat, wondering at Jesus over there, who is walking on this rough, choppy water, and the storm doesn't even faze him. They can't go anywhere in their boat with all their equipment and all their knowledge and all that they've been able to do in their life with sailing and navigating this water. They're going nowhere, and they're standing here wondering at how Jesus just walks through the storm. Will any of them have the trust to say, Jesus, I want to step out from this kind of wonder into the wonder of being with you and doing what you're doing? Peter. Most of you know this. Peter, of course. Peter says, I want to step out and join Jesus in this wonder. But no, remember what he did first. He didn't just jump out of the boat. He first said, Jesus, if you tell me to come out there, I will come out. And Jesus says, come. And Peter climbs out of that boat and begins to walk on the water toward Jesus. That's trust. Trust is responding to Jesus' calling and stepping into what he's doing and saying, this is what my life's going to be about. Trust is not just something you muster on your own. It starts with Jesus and his calling in your life to follow him, to love him, to live for him, to live as he lives in a way that honors him, but also in very specific ways. What does he want you doing for your occupation? How does he want you fulfilling that occupation? Where does he want you living? How does he want you to parent? How does he want you to be responsible for your neighbors? What is he having you do? What does he want you to do? It's all of this together. Trust is responding to his calling, and it's stepping off your map that you've laid out for yourself. Because if you can only go where you've mapped out, then you can never get where Jesus is calling you to be. If you and I will only stay on our boat, then the truth is we're not really going anywhere in that boat. We're just stuck in it. If we want to really go somewhere, we've got to step out of that and go with where Jesus is calling us. If we only go where we've been able to map out, we'll never go past anything other than what we can see. and become anything other than what we can make ourselves become within the limited world and our resources. But when we trust Jesus is when we step out of those things, off of our map, out of our boat, and into this place saying, Jesus, my life is yours. I'm responding to your calling. May your word to me become true, whatever it is, who you want me to be, what you want me to do. Now, I know you know what happened next in Peter's story. At least most of you do. He was walking on the water, and then suddenly the thought came to him, what if there be dragons out here? Look at the waves, look at the wind, look at everything. This is dangerous. And he began to focus on that stuff, and he began to doubt, began to lose that trust, and immediately he began to sink down. Even Mary. You know, we see Mary as blessed, but do you remember the time when Mary came looking for Jesus? Because she wasn't sure about what he was doing. She was confused about what he's doing. And so she got some of his brothers and they went looking, calling for Jesus to come to them because they wanted to bring him home. Because they just weren't so sure about what he was up to. Even Mary had moments where she doubted and that trust wavered and quivered. I've gone through moments, and I go through moments, and I will go through moments of doubt and confusion, just like Peter and just like Mary, where the storm and everything of life, especially in a year like this, has me running to my map, running to my boat, to the things that I feel are secure, the things that are going to, I know this, I'll stick with this. This I think will work. This feels safe. Running to that stuff instead of abandoning myself to Jesus, where fear of dragons chases me into hiding instead of heading out with Jesus, knowing that he's already slain them. You'll have moments like that too. Some of you are living in that moment right now. Others of you, you just need to be ready. It's going to come. Some of you are in the place where you're just maybe dipping your toe into the water for the first time of trusting Jesus. Others of you, a long time ago, you said, I trust Jesus, but if you're honest right now, you find yourself on your own map again, in your own boat again. Instead of trusting Jesus in the wonder of what he's doing, we get worried and afraid, and then we start to feel buried underneath life. And when Peter, in that moment, when his trust wavered and he began to sink, do you remember what happened, what it says? It says, immediately, Jesus reached out and grabbed him and steadied him. Jesus didn't wait there and said, let's let this kid learn a lesson for a little while as he struggles. He immediately reached out, grabbed him, steadied him, raised him up out of the sinking and said, you've got such little faith. Why would you doubt me? Why won't you trust me? That's what's amazing about Jesus. Even when, not if, even when our faith and our trust wavers and we struggle and we get afraid of dragons or afraid of storms, afraid of difficulty, he reaches out and he will steady us when we look to him. And then invite us just to trust him again. Don't let past failures to trust Jesus keep you from choosing to trust him today. Don't let it get in the way. Because Peter's story is your story and my story. Mary's story is your story and my story. Where Peter ends up a rock of faith, where Mary ends up blessed, that's where they ended up. But where they started is where you and I have started. Confused about, who is Jesus? What does this mean? What does it mean to follow him? What does it mean to answer his call in my life? The same confusion. They started in the same place. And Jesus is talking to you today through their stories. Jesus is calling to you today through Mary's story, through Peter's story, saying, will you trust me? Will you follow me? Will you stop standing there wondering what I'm doing and instead take this journey of trust and join me in what I'm doing and live in the wonder and awesome wonder of what I'm doing, rescuing people, saving them, drawing a new map for humanity, a way to life, a way to peace, a way to real blessedness. Will you join me in that and live this blessed life? Will you step out and let me wash you clean? Let me take away that sin, take away that anxiety, take away that fear. And let's have a right and good relationship with each other where we are close. Will you step off the map and follow Jesus? Worship team, would you come back? Look, if I were better at preaching, I would have for you 5 steps now for how you can step off your map and into what Jesus is doing. But I think it's time for you to do your part. I think it's time for you and I now to wrestle with the questions that this passage leaves us with. And I can't do that for you, and you can't do that for me. We all need to go and reflect deeply on what it is that Jesus is saying to us here. So just three questions for you and I to do our part to let Jesus speak to us through his word today. The first one is this. What would it mean for you to say, I am the Lord's servant. May his word for me become true. May it be according to me, be to me according to what he has said. To acknowledge that you're not the center of your universe or any universe, but that Jesus is. What would it mean for you to say, I am the Lord's servant? I'm not going to live my map. I'm going to live his. What would it mean? What has to change? What has to become new? What does that mean in your life? Second question is this. What does it mean for you to step off your map or climb out of your boat? What does that mean? If you don't know what that means, if you're wrestling with this today or tomorrow and thinking about what does it mean for me to step off my map? Right, where are the things I'm clinging to for my security? What does it mean? What does that look like? If you're not sure, ask a friend, call someone, and say, hey, look, I'm trying to wrestle with this. Call me. I'd gladly talk to you about this. Maybe we can help each other. What does it mean for you to step off your map, step out of your boat, and follow him? And then the third question I have is just simply this. Don't you want to take this journey? Don't you want to take this journey from confused wondering about what God is doing and who he is and what Jesus means and all that stuff? That journey of trust over into living in the wonder, living in the blessed place of being part of what he's doing in your entire life. Don't you want to take that journey and experience that? And if you do, then I'm the Lord's servant. I'm stepping off my map. That's what we wrestle with.